Back to the real deal with Syl and Tim. We're so happy to be joined with Antonio French, editor and one of the most creative writers from pubdef.net. Antonio, just to get on a couple more topics to hear your opinion, with Don Imus having been in the news, not that I really want to talk much about that, but the use of degrading terms and words for women that is in our society, our culture, whether it's through hip-hop music, through television, through movies. How do you feel about that?
Well, first, I'd like to say that I think it's interesting that this debate over one man saying one thing about one specific group of people has turned into an attack on hip-hop and hip-hop culture. I don't think Imus is in any way representative of hip-hop culture, nor would he even claim to have been 2 weeks ago. But it's interesting how that's happened. In general, I'm a hip-hop fan. I'm of the hip-hop generation.
I am too.
I use probably a lot of words in talking to my friends that would not be seen, I would not use in other company.
Really?
Not necessarily about any group of people other than us. I'm speaking specifically of the N-word. I do use that. But I don't think that gives authority to Imus to use it.
Wow.
Do you not use that one?
No, I don't, and I'm.
Well, now we got ourselves a debate.
I don't mean to be
I know.
I don't mean to be in shock here, but I'm. You know what? I'm glad you're honest.
Sure.
A lot of people would just say that they don't use it when they actually do. So you admit to using the word when you're with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
What about if you're out, having lunch and you said it? Would you be afraid of, other people who are not black heard you using that word? Are you concerned? Are you careful? How do you control that?
This is the real deal with Syl.
It is.
So let's have a real deal.
I'm sorry. Oh, that guy over there who's he?
So let's have the real deal. And I think that you don't talk to when you talk to your sister or you talk to your best friend. You talk in ways that you may not talk necessarily to your boss at work. So you use different language at different times, and different words have different meanings depending on the usage, who you're talking to, what you're saying, what you're describing. So, language is a complicated thing, and once we get to a point where we start banning certain words from common use in America, I think that's a slippery slope to start going down. I think everyone is subject to interpret what someone says, how they feel to interpret. But to just forbid somebody from saying it or to expel a word from the English, vocabulary, I'm not prepared to go down that road.
All right. So then, on that note, I have another question. Are you all right with white people using the N-word? I think you said no, but I want to be clear here.
I am not all right with that.
Are you all right with them using it towards each other as a term of endearment?
No. But I've been in groups before where you're like in a restaurant and you hear like a group of young kids walking down the street, high school kids, and they're casually calling themselves that.
Yes.
And that's a consequence, I think, of how hip hop's audience has changed.
Whoa, wait a minute, has changed?
I think so. I think the marketability of hip hop has. I think most of the people that buy hip hop, you might be surprised what those people look like and what demographic they're from now.
There's a dominant number of people buying hip hop and rap or not African American.
Okay, you're right. We get the bootleg copy.
I learned that back in we talked about during the break about our high school days or whatever. But one of my first lessons into that was when I went to my first concert, which was a Public Enemy concert at the Arena.
Wow.
And I was like the only black person in that whole place.
What?
It was incredible. That was my first entrance into so this is really what hip hop fans are looking like.
Wow. Okay.
Well, you asked about the N-word and white people, and I remember an incident. It wasn't an incident; it was just an experience. I was at 7-Eleven in Deep South St. Louis, and I gotten out the car, and I was getting ready to pump some gas, and as I was pulling the gas, the pump out, somebody said, "Hey, my ear," and I turned around and it was a white guy, and he was looking my way, and I'm like, wait a minute, what's up with this? he was actually talking to his friend that was going into the 7-Eleven, and that's how they were just communicating with each other.
And see, I know, and I hear white people use it towards each other all the time as well. And my thing is, like with you saying you use it and you're not okay with white people using it. And I promise we're going to take your calls in a minute. I know you guys are holding and you're getting mad at me. But if it's okay for you to say it. I can't understand why you would get. I too am not okay with white people saying it, but I'm also not okay with black people saying it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't understand how someone who uses the word can use it and not be okay with white people using it in a term of endearment. You're using it as a term of endearment to your buddy. So if a white person is using it as a term of endearment towards their buddy, and if you go into some of the high schools today, walk around, white people are using it to black people as a term of endearment, and blacks are using it back to white people as a term of endearment. And the word is really evolving into something else that people who are older, and you and I are not that much older than the high school kids, and we can be bothered by it.
First of all, you might have some issues with age. That word was around when I was just a little tadpole.
I'm just saying that
but here,
it's a problem for me.
Well,
it's a problem probably for
but there are a couple of issues here. One, that word unfortunately has become a fabric of our culture, and I'm not just talking about African American culture, because it's so much a fabric of the hip hop industry, and most hip hop and rap are purchased by white people. They also communicate that way. The other thing is you know well and good that it's oftentimes how you use inflection when you say the word, which has the different meanings.
Okay, fine. So if they're using their inflection the way that
as a term of endearment or used as a derogatory term.
I mean, I'm just saying, if you're using it casually and Antonio's using it casually, what do you expect white teenager kids to do? Do you expect them to think, oh, well, they use it casually, I can too? That's what they're going to think.
Well, that's what they're going to think.
Well, let me one say too is that when I talk about not feeling, I don't feel comfortable. I'm not comfortable with that. With being with my white friends and using that word for them to use that word to describe me or talk to me, even in a comfortable way. But it's not just race too, because I'll give you a good example. Is that when the old guy across the street from me talks about those N-words, he's not using it in the
right.
playful sense that I'm using it in
right.
with my buddy. He's an old black man, and he's using it in a derogatory way to talk about a certain group of people, young African Americans. So just because he's black doesn't mean that he said it and it meant something good. So it does come down to, it's a complicated word, perhaps the most complicated in the English language, especially right now. But it just comes down to what people are comfortable with, and obviously people are not comfortable with a guy in Amish using anything close to that.
Right. All right, wait, no, Tim. I promised I would take some calls.
Yes,
These people have been holding since the beginning of the hour. Faithful people. So, Demetrius, you are on the air with Syl and Tim and Antonio French. Do you have a question or a comment? We'll deal with Syl and Tim, and we are joined with Antonio French. We're so excited to have you here.
Yeah, actually,
One quick question.
I feel like an afterthought here.
I don't even know what your name is anymore. One quick question. I know Tim wants to talk a lot more about Pub Def Time, but I find you so when I find myself actually reading when I'm at work and I'm not supposed to be your column, and I'll just look real quick. What's he got to say? So I'm curious where you stand on more with some hip hop questions since you brought it up. Guys who are walking around with these sagging pants. It's a hip hop trend because they're the ones who started it. Basically, well, I know where it really started in prisons, but now we've got all these hip hop artists who are wearing the saggy pants. They're kind of determining our youth today and how they are dressing. So I want to know where you stand with the saggy pants. And let me see, are you sagging? No, you're not sagging.
I got my belt
you got a belt
today.
on. All right.
I think it is very closely related to the N-word discussion. Whether you admit to using it or not in certain settings. Some people in certain settings it is appropriate, and in some settings it's not appropriate. If you're with your boys playing basketball in O'Fallon Park, then your pants can sag and you can use N-word all you want, and it's not going to have any consequence. And it's in company that understands. But if you're wearing your sagging pants to to try to get a job in corporate America, it may not work so well on the interview. So, you know, I don't think you can stop people from wearing their pants how they want to wear it. But you have to teach young people from an early age that there are consequences to certain actions in certain environments.
Right.
So that's the lesson.
You know, but I think that in that same sentence that you made, it's funny. I love you. I absolutely love you. Don't take anything I say as offensive, but if you're sagging and you're around and you're in O'Fallon Park and you're playing basketball and you're leaving O'Fallon Park now and you're walking to your car and there's a group of little old ladies walking down the street and they see a bunch of guys with these sagging pants and their little wife beater, you know, a t-shirt on. I shouldn't call it that. I know Tony is going to get mad at me. At any rate, you know, they're going to get scared. I mean, it's a threatening. My former co-host George Cotton said he is intimidated when he sees a group of black young boys coming at him in sagging pants. He is a black man.
Now here's the question, though. The question is it the fault or the responsibility of those black youths to not be themselves in order not to offend, or is it the responsibility of those old ladies or the elders to understand that just because somebody's wearing their pants sagging, it doesn't have any implication on their level of intelligence or whether they're going to actually perform a physical act on you?
But look. I mean, this is a time-related issue. Prior to baggy pants, in the 60s and the 50s, there was the bandanas on their head because they had their hair
do
up. No, that scared a lot of people.
But it wasn't disrespectful. A belt holding your pants up is a respectful thing to do. Showing me your underwear while you're walking in a mall, while you're walking down the street, that is disrespectful.
Well, I think it's really interesting that you would talk about the young guys that would wear their pants down, but you have women walking around with their thongs showing up. Now, is that disrespectful to the old men?
It's disrespectful to all. It's disrespectful to all. I don't want to see anyone's panties. I don't want to see anyone's underwear. I don't want to see any of that. I'm just saying.
You might not leave home anymore.
You know what?
And what about the plumber who's at your house that when he's bent over?
My husband is my plumber.
Yeah, that's another subject.
Oh, I hate you so much. You know what? Before we go any further, because I promised I would take all these people's calls, Go ahead.
I wish that America's fear of young black males was limited just to how we wear our pants. That if we all pulled our pants up, everyone would be in harmony and
you know what?
And fully employed.
If we all pulled our pants up, and if we all stopped using the N-word, and if we all stopped calling women B's, H's, and you know, what else do they have now? Chicken heads. I mean, there's so many new terms for women. I haven't heard hardly any for guys. If we would all stop doing that, we would live in almost racial harmony. I have a couple other ideas too, but hey, Robert, you've been holding for a while. Hurry it up.
It's easy to answer that question because that happens to me just about every day. One, those kids that you're talking about are my neighbors. Two, I know their names. Three, I have conversations with them. And four, I'm not afraid of them. I'm not saying that it's all right to be disrespectful, to use derogatory words for women, and to have that kind of mentality. What I'm saying is that we shouldn't judge our youth based solely upon their physical dress. You know, there was a time not long ago when young white males were the same things were said about them for having long hair and long sideburns. Same thing was said about black athletes in the Olympics for having afros. You know, so culture changes, and you know it changes on the front end, and sometimes older folks on the back end are just kind of catching up to where the youth are going.
And I can definitely agree with that. Those are some really great points. Quickly, because we're almost out of time, if you want to catch up with Antonio French, go to his website, pubdef.net. Catch us at myspace.com/realdeal WGNU 9:20 a.m. You can catch this show and previous shows, and we'll catch you guys next week at 4 o'clock on Tuesdays.
There's nothing more refreshing